Greetings, my friends, in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. These are challenging days to be followers of Jesus. It almost goes without saying. Across this nation and around the world, we are living through times of deep uncertainty. Our political life in the United States is divided and angry. Questions are being raised about the very nature of our democracy, about the power of the presidency, the role of Congress and the courts, and whether we, the people, can still trust one another to share common facts and seek the common good. Our government is once again shut down, and of course that's happened before, but this time it feels different because finding common ground no longer even seems to be a goal. Our economy feels fragile. There are families who are anxious about work, health, and security. Federal aid is being cut for those who hunger, and many are turning to churches and food banks just to make it through the week, while the stock market is raging and those with significant wealth are making lots of money. Wars rage across the world. In Gaza, there is a fragile peace and great suffering. In Ukraine, the war still rages, and nuclear testing has begun again in both Russia and the United States. Here at home, we are struggling over immigration. For generations, we've called ourselves a nation of immigrants, and yet now, thousands are being deported while others who have followed the law in seeking asylum find themselves detained or trapped in fear. Here in this diocese, many of our neighbors, even members of our congregations who have lived here for decades but never became citizens, are finding themselves living in fear. Fear of the very government of the country they have called home for most of their lives. We have long called for sensible immigration reform in the Diocese of the Rio Grande, for a policy that makes moral sense, that can tell the difference between those who cross the border to traffic in drugs or guns or human beings, and those who cross seeking safety or a chance to work and raise their families. But now, it feels as though the very rules of the game are being rewritten, and even those who have abided by the law are finding themselves punished under new rules, afraid of being taken off the street by masked men. There is a deep uncertainty about who we are and what we represent as the United States of America today. For some, these changes are long overdue. For others, it feels as though the country they love is betraying its own long-held values. And as people with such wildly different visions of this nation, as we look at one another across the divide, we can feel a lot of anger and fear, and there's a temptation to meet that fear with violence or plugging our ears to not hear the other one. At the same time, creation itself is groaning. Across our diocese, we've seen wildfires, floods, and droughts, signs that we must become better stewards of God's creation. Here in New Mexico and far west Texas, people are eagerly adopting renewable energy, solar and wind turbines, knowing that burning fossil fuels can't last. While others are emphasizing our current need for oil and gas and the jobs it provides, here too we must find common ground, including conserving our resources for the future. Looking at all that's happening in the world today, it seems to me that at the heart of many of our moral decisions is a simple but profound tension between doing what is best for me right now and doing what is best in the long run for creation, for our children and our children's children, and for the generations yet to come. We are called by God to be good stewards of creation, to plant trees whose shade we may never sit under, to build a world that outlives our comfort, to choose what sustains life, even when it costs us something in the present. The world feels unsettled, and many people now are searching for something steady and something true. In the midst of all this division, our Episcopal Church is one of the few places left where Republicans and Democrats gather each week to pray together and share the Holy Eucharist. In our church, we regularly find ways not just to live together in our differences, but to actually love one another and work together for our common values. Our world today needs our church and the promise and hope which we embody. The Episcopal Church exists to remind us of our Creator and to proclaim that God has made this world in love and that we are entrusted to care for it and for one another. Jesus taught us to love our neighbor and even to love our enemies. And the church is here to teach that love and embody it, to practice that love in our community. When you drive into any town, you often see steeples or towers with crosses on them with the Episcopal Church shield outside, architectural reminders of what truly matters in this life on earth. The Episcopal Church exists to remind people of those deeply held common values, to provide moral guidance and wisdom, and to offer pastoral care and welcome when no one else will. Not long ago, one of our new deacons asked me about wearing the clergy collar, when to wear it and when not to. His question took me back to what I learned in seminary in England more than 30 years ago. A friend of mine, a chaplain in the British Navy, once told me that chaplains in the British Navy have no rank. Instead, the chaplain assumes the rank of whoever they're speaking with at the moment. If a chaplain in the British Navy is speaking with an admiral, they have the rank of an admiral. If they're speaking with a first-year seaman, they are a first-year seaman. The point is that the priest meets every person exactly where they are as an equal, not over them, but beside them, carrying the love of God. That is what I think the world needs right now. Priests like that. People who show up in the name of Christ, not to judge, but to walk with, not to control, but to care, to bring wisdom and love. Every town and neighborhood needs somebody who will meet you where you are with the love of God and stay with you through the ups and downs of life. Someone who will come to see you in your hospital bed or sit with you when you enter hospice care. Someone you can call when you're trying to make a hard decision. Someone who will take an interest in your family and remind you of what really matters. Who will help you discern right from wrong, not by condemnation, but in love. In our Episcopal tradition, we speak of the cure of souls. Cure being an old word for care. Clergy exists to care for our souls, to meet us where we are with God's love, so that we may know that we are loved and live out that love in love for our neighbors. And the world especially needs priests like that today. So many people have been hurt by religion or fear that the church only seeks to control their lives or wants their money. People who have been wounded by the church and people who have no faith but have many questions need exactly the kind of priests our Anglican tradition forms. Clergy who stand beside, not above, who remind us that love is stronger than death. We can have a church without buildings, but we can't have a church without priests and deacons. Those who show up in their simple habits and collars to remind us what is right and to do so in love. They're the ones who hold the care of our souls. And our call as a diocese is to make sure that such clergy will always be available to serve, to teach, and love us in Christ's name. Right now, we have 15 people preparing for ordination to the priesthood and 2 preparing for the permanent diaconate. Over half of them are studying in 3-year residential seminaries, Virginia, Sewanee, and the Seminary of the Southwest. The rest are a part of the Bishop's School for Ministry, but however they are prepared for ordination, all seminarians must pass the same graduate ordination exam. These are faithful, dedicated people who want to serve here in this diocese. But unless we can offer full-time stipends with benefits and health insurance and pensions for them and their families, they will need to serve elsewhere. And believe me, the rest of the church would love to have them. We cannot count on retired or bivocational clergy to meet our needs in the future. We must figure out together how to provide livings for the clergy God is calling to serve here. A year ago, I announced that we were beginning a 4-phase project here in the Diocese of the Rio Grande. These 4 phases are how we will ensure that this church, this way of following Jesus, remains strong in New Mexico and far west Texas for generations yet to come. Phase 1 was an invitation to celebration. Every congregation gathered for one meeting to name what is beautiful and life-giving about the Episcopal Church for them. And 65% of our congregations took part. What we heard again and again was gratitude for this church, for its ancient faith and its open heart, its welcome of women and LGBTQ people, its balance of tradition and thoughtfulness, its clergy who teach, visit, and care. Phase 2 asked each congregation's vestry or bishop's committee to look honestly at its financial trajectory, to ask how old are your pledgers and what will happen as they pass the baton. We discovered that most of our diocesan income comes from people over 70. And if nothing changes, the average congregation will lose about 30% of its income in 5 years, about 60% in 10. But trajectories can change. This is not a cause for despair, but it is a call to action. So beginning in 2026, I'm inviting the diocese to enter phase 3. Phase 3 is about facing our mortality as individuals and as a church with faith, gratitude, and courage. It's not simply a fundraising campaign, it's a spiritual renewal invitation, an invitation to deepen our faith in God and strengthen our relationships with those we love. Phase 3 asks each of us to take on 3 spiritual practices that prepare us not only for our death, but for the witness we will leave behind. When we die, we want to be surrounded not only by our family, but by our church. We want our families to see how powerful it is to be loved by God and to be a part of a community of faith. The first exercise in phase 3 is to prepare or update your last will and testament. The Book of Common Prayer reminds us that all persons should make wills while they are in health, so that the goods we have been given by God may be handed on with charity and justice. The Reverend Lynn Finnegan, who is a priest of this diocese and before she was ordained was an estate attorney, once reminded me why the document is called a last will and testament. She said, the will is about what happens to your possessions and money, but the testament is your testimony, your declaration of what truly matters in your life and what your loved ones to know. She said, your will can express your values, but your testament expresses your faith. It's an opportunity to tell your loved ones what you believe, what has sustained you, what has given your life its meaning. So don't wait. Talk with your children and your grandchildren about how your faith and its expression in the Episcopal Church has meant to you, how prayer has shaped your life, how being part of Christian community has encouraged you in times of difficulty. In your will, I also ask that you remember your congregation and your diocese. Every generation before us has sacrificed so that the church we love will be here for us. Let's do the same for those who will come after us. The second exercise is to prepare or update your advanced directives for healthcare. This is not merely a legal form, it's a spiritual practice, a declaration that your life in every season belongs to God. By making these decisions now, you relieve those that you love of the painful choices they might make later. And you assure them that even in suffering, your trust is in God's mercy. The third exercise is to plan your funeral. Now that may sound uncomfortable, but it's one of the most loving things you can do for your family and for your church. The priest who presides at your funeral may not be your current priest. Remember that. So we need to write down your wishes and keep records. The hymns you have chosen, the readings you want to be read, and what you want your life message to be. Tell your family about it before the funeral. Talk with them about what you would like to happen when you die, so that they can see how God's grace is sustained in your testimony. Your life matters to the church in ways your children and grandchildren may not yet understand, so tell them about it. Tell them why this church has mattered to you, how it has been the place where you were taught, fed, and forgiven, and sent back out to love those in the world. When Lynn Finnegan and I first talked about this work, she said, Bishop, people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s are full of faith stories, but most have never shared them with their loved ones. That's what phase 3 is really about, telling the story of your faith, sharing the hope that is in you, and letting your family, particularly those that don't attend church, to see how powerful it is to be loved by a Christian community. Phase 3 will be accompanied simultaneously by phase 4, which is our effort to help provide for the Diocese of the Rio Grande itself, to endow the episcopate and secure the future of ministry in the Rio Grande. In many dioceses, the cost of the bishop's office is covered by an endowment so that congregational fair share funds can be used for youth ministry, campus ministry, church planting, and outreach. In our diocese, 85% of the bishop's office budget comes directly from the congregational fair share every month. When parishes are late, we face a cash flow challenge in the bishop's office. A strong phase 3 will strengthen congregations, and a strong phase 4 will relieve the burdens congregations have on paying for the bishop that they need so that the bishop's ministry and diocesan staff can serve every congregation for generations to come. As I travel around the diocese, I'm aware of two trends that trouble me deeply. The first one you've heard me speak of before, that congregations who have had a full-time priest no longer can afford one. The truth is that many of those congregations never truly had the resources to provide a competitive salary and benefit package. They had priests who were full-time in ministry but only partly compensated. Priests whose pensions came from the military or law enforcement service, or whose health insurance was carried by their spouse's job. When those priests retired or moved on, the congregations often suddenly discovered they could not afford a full-time replacement. In many of those places, the next Episcopal Church is a 2-hour drive away. There are few retired priests available to fill in. And so all of a sudden, a congregation that once had a resident priest who visited the sick and celebrated weekly Eucharist, who walked with people through Advent and Lent and Holy Week and Easter, all of a sudden those congregations have found themselves without anyone. They are now paying large sums for mileage just to get a supply priest to bring the Eucharist once or twice a month. That means they might have Eucharist occasionally, but they no longer have a pastor of their own. They no longer have a teacher who knows their stories, who understands their town, who loves the people and knows them well. Friends, we must find a way to provide circuit-riding priests whose cure of souls covers particularly the rural regions of our diocese. Priests and deacons who can plant new worshiping communities in our small towns and visit the sick there, teach the faith there, celebrate the sacraments there on a regular basis with people they know. This isn't simply about finding people willing to travel long distances. It's about calling clergy whose vocation is to know and love their community and to be back next week. The second trend is harder to say out loud, but it must be said. Many of our congregations are sometimes more focused on preserving the church they love now than on extending the faith to those who are not yet members of the church. I understand that instinct. We love our churches and we love our buildings where our children were baptized and our loved ones are buried. But some of our congregations are spending everything they have just trying to maintain the buildings and the staff they can no longer afford, while the mission field around them remains largely untouched. It is time, perhaps past time, for us to begin building the Diocese of the Rio Grande that will expand the reach of the Episcopal Church into the future. We must be less concerned about meeting only our own needs and more concerned about reaching those who are not yet in our pews. That will mean making some hard choices. It will mean developing a real estate strategy for the diocese region by region, deciding carefully which buildings we keep and how we can leverage or develop church property in order to pay the income for the clergy we need in the years ahead. Some of our properties sit on land that could serve more than one holy purpose. We could imagine building low-income housing or campus housing on church grounds to generate steady rental income to serve our neighbors. In a few cases, it may mean redeveloping the whole property or maybe even selling some church property so that the proceeds can endow clergy positions for the future. But the goal is not to abandon our buildings, but to make them serve the mission we need in the future so that the gospel can continue to be preached and the sacraments celebrated in every corner of this diocese. Our buildings are sacramental trusts, not personal possessions. They're visible signs of the church's presence, but they're also tools we need to leverage for the future. We're stewards, not owners, and sometimes stewardship means allowing what we love to change so that new life can grow. If we do not make serious strategic changes in the next 5 to 8 years, we will have Episcopal churches in our urban centers, but the experience of being an Episcopalian in small towns will be that of belonging to a church without a priest, without a teacher or pastor, without regular Eucharist. That's not something I want to see as your bishop. It's not acceptable that the wealthier congregations in our cities have full-time clergy and good pastoral care, while our rural congregations have none. Now, I'm not saying that the burden of rural ministry must fall solely on the shoulders of our larger congregations, but I am saying that we together as a diocese have to create a strategy that uses our collective resources, our property, our endowment, and our generosity to ensure that priests are available wherever people need them. Those of us who can afford to give and have faith, not just to our colleges and universities or the United Way, must give to the church. Because if we don't, the church won't be here for our children and grandchildren. We have about 5 years, perhaps 8, while this current generation of faithful people who give still has the means to act. And after that, we'll be forced to start selling churches just to keep the lights on. I don't want to say that to frighten anyone, but I say it because time is short and the need is urgent. We can have a church without buildings, but we cannot have a church without clergy. And the good news is that when people discover the Episcopal Church today, they love what they find, because they encounter priests and deacons who are learned and welcoming, who offer the sacraments freely, even if you're divorced, who show up in times of need, who help people understand that they are beloved of God. That is the future we must secure. That is the diocese we must build together. So I ask you, support both your congregation and your diocese in every way you can. Give of your time, your gifts, your prayers, your resources. We are preparing the curriculum for Phase 3 for 2026 in ways that will offer practical guidance for everyone of every resource level to help, so that regardless of how big your bank account is, you can be a part of securing the future of the church we love. This work will require courage and imagination and faith, but I believe God has placed us here in this time and place for just such a purpose. The Diocese of the Rio Grande, stretching from the mountains to the desert, has always been a mission diocese, and our mission now is clear: to make sure the gospel of Jesus Christ is preached, the sacraments celebrated, and the people of God cared for in every community in this vast and beautiful land. May God give us the grace to do this work with hope and gratitude and with love for those who will come after us. Keep the faith, my friends.